Hey guys, welcome to Blended Conversation. I am back. It is Eccentrich, and we are so happy to have you here with us. As always, we start by saying we hope you and your family are being safe at this time, taking advantage of all the virtual activities we have online for you. And today, we bring to you a poet, a friend of mine, Sherrika Mitchell. She's an incredibly gifted writer and performer, and I'll let her finish introducing herself. Please welcome with me, Sherrika Mitchell. Hey, Rika.
I hear the applause in the background going.
Tell us about yourself.
So, as he said, my name is Sherrika. I am a slam poet. I actually started writing back in high school. I started competing in high school. I took a hiatus through my undergrad and then picked up back slamming once I got into graduate school. So a little bit about myself. So I'm a double alum of FAU, Go Owls. I'm currently a resident area coordinator for FAU. I went to PA for some time and then decided that the snow wasn't for me. So now I'm back. But I am a writer, a true lover of poetry. It got me through a lot, and then coming from an island background, they didn't really value like, hey, what is poetry for you or doing for you? You need to pick the school. And so it really gave me an outlet at a time where you were looked at as a child, right? So, hey, you don't have real problems. What do you mean? You have a roof over your head. And so poetry has done a lot for me. So whenever I can do this kind of engagement, I'm like, yeah, to talk about poems. Yeah.
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 I totally get it. I totally get it.
And so outside of that, I've been on a few slam teams. Shout out to Dada Slam.
Shout out to Dada.
And also Burn Beautiful Slam team. So, we placed 5th, 6th in the nation, 2nd, so just some poetry. Yeah.
I definitely can relate. My father is Haitian, so it's the same kind of thing about the arts. And it's more so about they don't see it as a means to provide for you, not the life that they think you should live. So it's not it's not highly looked upon, like you said, for Arlen people. It's like, you gotta go to school, you gotta take care of yourself and stop playing them little games with the little arts. And I remember when I left pharmacy, I went to school for pharmacy, and then tragedy happened, and I walked away, and I went full-time artist entrepreneurship. And my daddy was like, girl, what you doing? You got 2 kids. Who gonna take care of you? And what is this poetry crap you keep talking about? But you keep trucking, and every milestone, it's like, oh, that's kind of cool. Oh, that's kind of cool. And when you land a real job, that's a job that pays you okay and you have benefits. That's the real job. They're like, you finally made it. Keep this good job. And all you're thinking is, but what about?
What about, like me and like expressing like, things I hold on to, I don't necessarily communicate with other people, and the only way I get it out is through poetry. And I will always remember I was in high school and I was left babysitting my little cousin. And so I had beef because I was like, when I was that age, y'all left me by myself. So I don't know why I had to babysit. And so it was because it was called Right Side Poets.
That was in Lauderhill, right?
It was in Lauderhill. Some call it Deep Side if you from
Deep Side. Yeah, I was in Deep Side. I remember that.
And I remember when I was small, when I was in high school, I was obsessed with like Brooke Young from New York. Okay, I don't know what it was, but I just loved Brooke Young. And he was doing a performance at University of Miami. And so we had a chance to go down there to perform, to open up. And, I'm like calling my dad, like, hey, like they're about to leave. Like, I need to go. And so, I busted YOLO and left my little cousin home and just started running up to at this point, it's probably 20 minutes from my house. So I'm like really like footing it to get to the venue to leave. And then my dad called me like, he's Jamaican. Where you there? Why you leave the house? And I was like, I'm like crying now because I'm like, I told you about this poetry performance. And, he was like, you need to get home now. And so I remember like sitting outside just crying. And then he got home. He was like, what poetry do for you? Like, that is something that has always stuck with me.
Wow.
Yeah. And so like, I had a chance to work with the Jason Taylor Foundation to do the Blue Aqua Poetry Network, right? So when I used to go into these high schools, I would come across like students who had similar things happening in their household where they just needed someone to empower them. And so it is so, like, people don't understand, like, the arts, like, no matter the medium, is so crucial because we never know what's going on in a household. Granted, it may not be abusive, but there's something lacking that some students really need.
Yes, and that's important to know any medium and any form of expression. I think a lot of it too is, I like to think of the arts have always been like the backdrop or the soundtrack of almost every movement that you can think of, particularly really big in the civil rights movement. There was music. Marvin Gaye was huge with, activism with music. And then you had the Renaissance era come up with your Langstons and your Mayas and your Jimmy Baldwin and all those people. And what the arts do is provide that voice. Like you said, it empowers people. And sometimes for certain people, that's scary, right? Because especially in children, because you raise these kids to, I wouldn't say be carbon copies of yourself, but you raise them to your standard. And them finding their own voice, more than likely, is going to clash with that standard. So it's a matter of that being, I find that even with, we go into the prisons, I find that even with going to the prisons and the money that FDOC will put into the arts, it doesn't happen. And the reason they told me literally out of their own mouth was, it's very difficult to get us to fund the arts because it makes them think. And the more they think, the harder they are to control. And this is what they told us. And we're looking like, but these are people who are going to transition back into our communities. And you mean to tell me you don't want them to be effective thinkers and communicators? And, same thing for kids. Kids are going to grow up. They're going to become adults. And
they need to critically think.
So,
and then they get mad when the kids don't critically think.
Yes, it is very strange. So, always to be able to sit down and talk about these things is important for those people who don't see the value or are afraid of the value that the arts provide. I think this is a good time to go into your first poem. You mentioned that you had a Jamaican father. So before we get into the poem, you were born in Jamaica, or tell me a little bit about that.
So I was actually born in Jamaica. Clarendon, one of the, my accent comes out because I can't say like Clarendon without Clarendon. So I was actually born in Mayfield, Clarendon, which is one of the middle parishes. People know Kingston, so approximately probably like an hour and change, depending.
Okay.
Outside of Kingston, not outside, well, inside because it's in the middle. So I was born there. I came to America actually in 2000. So I was about, 7 going on 8. But being at home, it wasn't really much of a difference because, everybody at the house, everybody speak Patois. We rarely ate out. Daddy's always cooking. My aunt's always cooking. Grandma was cooking. And so I just remember like the transition going into like the American school system. I was just like, hey, Sherrika, you speak English, but you don't sound like everyone else, right? Because even in 2nd grade, I had a teacher tell me like, you read, first of all, they placed me back in 2nd grade because I was too young to be in 3rd grade. And then I remember being in that class, they're like, you read well, but you read slow. And I'm like, well, I'm trying to sound like everybody else. Like, being a 7-8-year-old around, kids are cruel. So I'm like trying to sound like everyone else. But, you know, like majority of my folks are from Jamaica. My mom is from Jamaica, but she actually lives in England. And so it, you know, it was interesting coming to America at such a young age, because at that point, you know, I'm a sponge. So I'm like trying to soak up everything. But at the same time, you know, I have my whole Jamaican family who are still fully, you know, in their Jamaicanness and all their values that, you know, and so even now as an adult, there's some things I'm still trying to unlearn about American culture that was like kind of forced upon me, like as a child in a Jamaican and island culture, right? So yeah, a little bit about it. I was born there, came to
All right.
America. I just got my citizenship like last year.
Congratulations. Hey, the Bob. Congratulations on that. Hopefully it was a good process. I don't know what to call it. But
So I
hopefully
was
it
in,
went as smooth as possible.
yeah, I was in PA at the time. So everything, literally my timeline just went
Good,
by.
good. Well, I'm happy to hear that and welcome officially. And that means we can't get rid of you, which we don't want to. And I think this is a great time to roll into our first poem. We'll call it Jamaica. And this is probably one of my favorite pieces of yours. And I think it's perfect to just compound upon your background and your life in Jamaica. So for you out there, I hope you guys enjoy this poem. Take a listen, chime in, let us know what you think. And here it is, Jamaica.
People love ask me where I come from. So me tell them love claim Jamaica, or their mother and father come from Kingston. Like say Kingston are the only parish where exists. Them love ask me if it say something. So me say hello. Then ask me if it say something again. So me say aye. Them things say me tongue as some kind of fashion statement. Then love ask me about me hip and how me move like say me have no spine. If me smoke ganja, if me make jerk chicken, if Shatter are my favorite movie, them want know everything will fascinate them. But not what left nightmares at the bedside of a 6-year-old. Not the number of miles walked to catch clean water in painter's bucket. Not how 5:30 a.m. shower brush quickly over goosebump skin running water we never caught up to. They don't want to know about Clarendon, Meapentown, Mocha, Ronakaman, gun wars in broad daylight that shelled us in on school days. I'm talking army men. In your backyard, eye contact with loaded barrels may leave casings. Laying at your feet, wrong political party affiliation may bring you closer to God than justice. Sweeping mothers, crossing over their hearts and son bodies at once, wearing gunpowder like war paint, fighting for their son's sake, but a prayer can't outlast a bullet days. I don't speak much about my heritage because your attention span does not travel beyond vacation destinations. I'm talking countrysides where dirt and blood are synonymous. Weed is actually illegal. Every dreadlock on a Rastafarian. I do not know how to swim. I am drowning in the sea of your ignorant questions like we all don't tread the same water. My English may be broken, but my heritage is far from broken. My English may be broken, but my heritage not broke. It's what transformed a one-bedroom zinc house into a mansion in the heart of the ghettos. And you ask about my precious Jamaica. Understand, so in a fashion statement, out of many, we are still one people. Know that some days we may wake up ugly, but our beauty does not stop on the resort shorelines of Montego Bay. It runs much deeper than that.
And we are back. I hope you enjoyed Jamaica. It is one of my favorite poems. Please chime in. Let us know your thoughts on the conversation as well as the art that you see, Sherrika. So if you're not familiar with Blended, typically we have a jar with random questions that you'll pull from and we'll discuss with the audience. So to do that virtually, we have been picking numbers between 1 through 5. So now is your chance to pick a number between 1 and 5. I'm going to ask you a question. We'll talk about it, and then we'll get into some more art. So
Okay.
1 through 5, your go.
Gotta go in the middle. 3.
3. All right. So 3, question 3. Tell me a moment where you felt most proud of yourself.
Ooh, that's a really good question. A moment where I felt really proud of myself. I will have to say my transition back to Florida. And reason being, I like to play it safe. All my life, I played it safe. That conversation of like, hey, you being a full-time art entrepreneur, like that is so dope. I don't have, and me, I'm like, I need stability. I don't need the question, with entrepreneur, I'm like, ew. And so for me, when I was in PA, I loved what I do. But I wasn't completely in love with the surrounding, right? And so with that, and it impacted me in ways I didn't want to vocalize at the time, but then I had, face forward with it. And so, I went out on a ledge and, I had a conversation with my supervisor a year into the position, like, hey, next year, I don't think I'm going to renew my contract. So it was like the January, like I submitted my official, like, hey, this is my resignation letter. I'll be leaving like in middle of May. And so during that time, it was so scary because, like I've been employed for so long. And so now I'm like, I'm not gonna have a job. Sherrika, you don't have a job. You're leaving one job and got another job. And so like, the job application process and, sticking it through and like being positive. I was positive all the time, but just getting through that process, and getting an employment opportunity even before I moved back, I would say that was one of the like, hey, like you wanted to do something, you put your mind to it, you didn't let fear stop you, and you did it.
That's awesome. I think speaking of fear, that's exactly what it is a lot of times, right? And when I chose to do that, trust me, it took when I say tragedy, to push me there, literally. So it wasn't the easy, especially having 2 kids. And at the time I was making really good money, so I didn't get any government assistance. There was no Section 8 for me. Everything was full price, you know what I mean? And to completely just quit that was, and I get my dad's reaction, but I think realizing that fear paralyzes and that it really does stunt growth. And that is a lot to be proud of, especially if you're someone that plays it safe. So I think that's an amazing answer. I think for me, I'm trying to think of the proudest moment. It's been a lot of them in these little 34 years, just because I look back and I'm like, oh, I'm still here, huh? I think my proudest moment was when I found out I was pregnant with my first kid. I was on a full scholarship at the University of Florida, athletic scholarship, and I got pregnant my sophomore year. And it was very scary, and people were literally saying, you got to get rid of this kid. You have to, or you're going to lose everything. I did kind of, but I was so proud of the fact that I made the decision on my own, even though it was rather tough to get back, after I had him, to get back to school, to get back to moving. I had to get a job. I had to find somewhere to stay. I was really proud of me for making my own choice and not allowing outside factors to influence me to make a choice of something that at the end of the day, could happen if you're partaking in it, those kind of things. So I think that was my proudest moment, deciding that, yeah, hey, it's gonna suck, but I can do this. Like, I can do this. So that was my proudest moment. So you out there watching, share with us your proudest moment. It could be a moment in the arts. It could be a moment as a parent, as a child. It could be whatever. That time you found that voice that said, I can do something, or I am proud of myself. We would love to hear it. Share it in the comments below, and join in on the conversation. All right. I think we want some more poetry. And we're going to move into, let's see. We'll move into your poem about your mother.
Woo!
So the first time I heard this poem, I was at Baca. Shout out to Bailey, Lyrics Lab, Todd the God. Hey, we are staples at Lyrics Lab, right? Lyrics Lab has
Baca Wednesday.
I love Baca Wednesdays. We have been at Lyrics Lab and Baca for at least 4 or 5 years at this point.
A long time.
Yeah. So the first time I heard this poem, I was there, and I was like, I was really just, I think when I met you guys, I had never slammed. You were my first slam team. And when I heard this poem, I was like, this is dope. What is this? And she did what to Sherrika? And what happened? So we're going to go ahead and get into stones. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. And as always, please, while you're watching, feel free to react. Feel free to comment. We love that as poets and as artists. We love to hear what you got to say, even if you don't like it, even if you do like it. So here's stones. Enjoy.
My mother, impregnated with pebbles, gave birth to a solid stone, Sherrika. It took Michelangelo 3 years to break a peace stone into perfection. That is David. Mom, life has been breaking me down for 22 years now. Am I perfect yet, God? Can you be my Michelangelo? I do not have 3 years to prove to myself that I'm worthy of life. I've been breaking pieces of my skin to find peace in skipping rocks across rivers. I always get lost in the ripples, trying to work my way out of this reflection, always hitting rock bottom the first time. August 1999, introduced to a single-parent household. Mom, you can't raise a child with telephone calls, and dad, way of fathering with schooling, feeding, shipping me away on weekends. It was then I knew the difference between a house and the home, and that's something a 70-year-old shouldn't have to know. Life has been breaking me down like bacteria on dead skin, and I'm nowhere near perfection. 2001, little snotty-nosed kid carved ridicule in my skin because a strong Jamaican accent never fit in a them lifestyle. 2004, a belt's buckle left patches on my stone skin. Have you ever seen a statue bleed? Don't ask me why pebbles of hate from my own blood. 2008, I found and lost God all at once. Even now, forgot how to pray. Don't know the meaning of holy. Sometimes I feel like a prayer in the mouth of an atheist, just hopeless and hollow. But I hope my grandfather continue to be my guardian angel. The halves I've been broken into are nowhere near perfection. I have rubbles of my past rolling through the back of my mind that never let me forget the deep cuts. 2009, I knew what invisibility felt like. 2010, almost homeless, I learned survival. 2015, I'm here standing with stone bit scraps of myself surrounding, still miles away from being perfect, and the foundation I've laid inside my heart has grown to become skyscrapers to keep me in and others out. I don't know how to trust people. I don't know how to forgive and forget. My silence has become a part of my insanity. I can no longer hold my tongue. Mom, I was depending on you to hold the pieces of my past together. I know you can't control life or what other people say, but you can control your arms at night. When I cried, tears that dried rolling down my cheeks, I call myself a soldier in this battle. You were my bandage out of reach, and I know I need God for my perfection process, but I also need you. 4 hands are better than 2. Can you be my Da Vinci? Repaint Mona Lisa smiles across my face. Remind me of what it feels like to be beautiful. Remind me of what it feels like to be wanted. I am the stone you gave birth to 22 years ago, and I'm still breaking to find perfection, but I'm still breaking to find you.
Hey, we're back. I hope you enjoyed Stones. And that piece of archery, did you have anything to say about that poem? Is that poem really special to you or anything like that?
So this poem, right? So this poem, this was my first honest poem. I wrote the poem when I was 18. Yeah, this is the poem I wrote when I was 18. When I told you this was my first honest poem. Right?
Wow. Okay.
This is when I was with Bright Sides. You know, we were practicing for BNV, Brave New Voices, which, you know, is a teen national competition. Unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to go. But the coach at the time was like, you need to like write a poem. And I'm just like, what I've been doing all this time. Like, I've been writing poems. I got on the team. So I had to been writing a poem. He was like, no, like you write about other people, you know, you write about surface level things, but you've never truly written. And I'm like, well, tell me how you really feel. You know, I just remember being like so frustrated. And so like another team member at the time, he had a poem about, you know, his biological mother. And he was like, why don't you write a poem about the relationship with your mom? You know, like, as I said earlier, my mom, when she left Jamaica, she moved to England. So she moved to England right around, you know, when I was like 5, 6 around then. So predominantly I grew up with my dad, you know, on my dad's side of family. And so, you know, I didn't know I had all this balled up emotion, first of all, right? And I just remember that was the first poem I was, you know, completely transparent with myself. I cried from start to finish when I wrote it, and I wrote it in one sitting. I was like literally on my daddy bed, you know, I don't even know if daddy was in town or at work, but I just remember in this summer heat, because, you know, Jamaicans don't believe in AC. So, you know, the fan going, I'm hot and I'm sticky, but I'm crying and I'm like getting it all out. So I just remember like even the first time I performed it, it took a while before I even actually performed it in front of people. And then I was so scared. I don't know if it was scared, but like I was so nervous for my mother even to listen or hear the poem, right? And so like she didn't hear that poem till like maybe I was in grad school. That was
wow.
First. Yeah. And so being at that age now, like, you know, I'm looking back and now at that point, I have some kind of emotional like intelligence where I can like really process my thoughts and feelings, not only like to myself, but out loud to the person that kind of impacted me. So that conversation was a tough one, right? Because it's like certain things she was like, I did not mean for you to feel that way, but understand that for me to survive, this is what I had to do, right? So she took that moment to give me some context, but to her, it was still hurtful, certain things, right? Like,
absolutely.
Yeah, and this is the part of art where it's like when artists express certain things, it may personally impact those around them. Right. And so sometimes we get to this crossroad is like, do I put this art out knowing that it may impact someone else, not necessarily positively, but or allow them to reflect and be like, oh, wow, my actions did do that on someone else. So yeah, that poem, you know, at the time I wasn't even like thinking about literary devices. I didn't know about the extended metaphor throughout the poem. The first time I knew there was an extended metaphor, we did like a competition in a room filled with like page poets, right? So these folks, they don't do slam poetry, they don't do poetry out loud, they strictly just write. And so one of the judges came up to me and was like, that was a beautiful piece. I love the, you know, the extended metaphor all the way throughout the poem. And I'm just like, what?
The what?
Yeah, you know, like granted, I know what extended metaphor is, but I'm like, I didn't realize it, which it was like, now looking back, like when I go through, I'm like, Sherrikah, you know, like you start putting out literary devices in the piece, but in the moment, that wasn't, literary devices out the window. I'm just getting this out of me. It wasn't necessarily forced out of me, but it was challenged out of me.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's one of those pieces. Every time I do it or hear it, like I hear the video and I'm like all I remember is Summer Heat crying throughout the whole thing when I wrote it.
Wow. And I think we'll stay here rather than choosing another number, because I think this brings up a good topic, especially when you said this is where the arts get tricky, the creation of the work and how it affects everybody who comes in contact with it. And sometimes that's good, sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's indifferent. And especially when it comes to the people you love, you never want your art to not purposely hurt or disappoint or anything like that. And I think to this day, I think I still struggle with that a bit. Uncertain topics, believe it or not, I'm generally pretty open in my work, but when it comes to certain areas, I'm still like, if I say this, that is acknowledgement. And if you acknowledge something, then at some point you have to work through that acknowledgement. And that is where it gets tough. But at the same time, having the medium to start the conversation is so necessary. Like it's palpable and it's aiding in what you need to talk to this person about. So that's what I found interesting. And then the second thing you talked about was remember the setting you were in, remembering how it felt in that moment, which I found very interesting. So to the audience watching, some of you might say, well, I'm not a poet, I'm not a writer, I'm not an artist. Yeah, but these are very human emotions, and that's what Blended Conversation is. It's just using the arts as a vehicle to talk about very universal human things. We all remember a setting where we just felt this lump in our throat, or we felt a time where, okay, I finally have to face what I said. What was that moment for you? What was that moment where you had to it's almost like holding that person accountable, right? For how they made you feel, but then that person in turn holding themselves accountable and you to say, wasn't on purpose or I didn't do it, maliciously, but here we are with this piece of work that you have created and we need to talk about it. Because when I heard the poem, I was like, wonder if her mama heard that. And to know that your mom had not even heard it until very recently, I mean, pretty much, very recently is very interesting. And it makes the poem even more, for me, it makes the poem even more powerful because I'm like, okay, it doesn't mean you have to face it right away. It just means that it's there and eventually it's something you could, but you can wait until you get into that space. So I thought what you said about that was great.
Yeah, and that conversation was difficult. And granted, once again, I was at a different point in my life, and then when I brought up, like, very few people knew that in undergrad, like, I had therapy sessions, right? Because always utilize your campus resources, folks. It's a plug. And so it was like right before I graduated undergrad. So I'm sorry, it wasn't grad school shared deployment, it was like right before, like senior year of undergrad. And so I went through therapy. I was super involved in undergrad. Like, I always tell people, I have a minor in involvement. I was super
Did you
involved.
pledge at all by any chance?
I was initiated into an organization.
And what would that organization be?
Delta Sigma Theta Sorority. So it was a lot of pressures, right? And so in my therapy session, something I had to unpack was my relationship with my mother. And so that came up. So it just so happened, like, not few after, like she brought up the poem. And when I told her, I was like, like, I've talked through this in therapy. Like, I don't know why I said that, but like that opened a different can of worms. Like, she's like, oh my gosh, I sent you into therapy. And it's like, no. You didn't send me into therapy, but there are some things that I had to bring up to help me heal. Right. And so it and she kind of turned the light around on me, and she was like, well, why didn't you say something? Like if you felt this way, like growing up. And it's like, I don't know if I had the space to say something, right? Being a
The space is important. It's important for that space. And we hear that a lot these days about safe spaces. And I don't
believe in safe spaces.
No, not especially.
There's no such thing.
Not, and I don't know if it's just because I don't have much experience outside of my culture, but especially not in island household. And my mom's American, but my dad is Haitian. But my dad's Haitian background totally was how this household was ran. And there is no safe space to talk about things like that.
So even now, like, being in higher ed, even my student staff, and they put on programs and they're like, yeah, they advertise like, come into this safe space. And I have to stop them. Like, there's no such thing as a physical space being safe. The people in the space make it safe, right? So how can one be that advocate to make it safe? Like, so this notion, anytime I see a sticker, safe space, and I'm like, there's no such thing as a safe space. The people make it safe. But like with my mom, I was finally in that space where I can have this dialogue. And a part of it was hurting me a little bit to see her reaction. Like, you never want to hurt the people you love.
Absolutely.
But it just needed to be said. Like, yeah, I felt XYZ of a way when you left, right? Granted, you left for plenty of reasons that made sense to you in your development and your growth. I get that, but little Sherrikah didn't feel that way, right? Little Sherrikah don't have the capacity to sympathize or empathize with the decision you made during that time. Now, as adult Sherrikah looking back, like, all right, you had to do what you had to do, right? In that moment, like you had to handle your business. But once again, little Sherrikah, I did not see it like that back then.
Absolutely.
I just saw
2020.
Yeah, I just saw my mother leave me in Jamaica. That's all I saw. I didn't see anything else. There's a line, you can't raise a child with telephone calls, right? And so like when she used to call, I'm like, all right, cool. Hey, mom, and it's just like, it wasn't that same. Like for a long time, I hated Mother's Day. When I tell you I hated Mother's Day for an extended period of time, every part of me.
Wow. That's interesting. I think that was a great conversation. I think after that, we won't pull from the jar. We'll let that marinate and resonate with our guests who are joining us. And we'll move into our last poem and get ready to wrap up this session. And this last poem is called Breathe. And I think I saved it for the end just because of the time that we're in. And when I was thinking about what pieces to show of yours, and I like a wide range of topics. So we go from where you're from, then we talk about something really personal like your mom, and then we talk about something really universal like just the need to breathe as African-American men and women, and what we see happening throughout the world with these protests to end police brutality and systematic racism. So the poem in itself is very powerful. I think these type of poems, you're like, oh, they age well. And then you're like, I hope they don't age well. Because if they age well, that means we're still dealing with this, right?
Nothing changed.
But so if the poem ages well, it's like, thanks, but what are we doing? So this next poem, you guys, is Breathe by Sherrikah. I always said Shamika, your last name and first name, Sherrika, and enjoy the poem. Once again, as always, you're free and welcome to share your thoughts on the poem. And if the people make the space safe, let me be the first to tell you, Blended is the safest place you can be with me. Sherrika knows me. Please comment. Please tell us how you're feeling. Be respectful in your exuberance and enjoy
I
the
like the
poem.
way you said that.
You like the way I wrote that in there?
Yeah, I'm going to get it on the wall. Be respectful in your exuberance.
Be respectful in your exuberance. And enjoy the next poem.
Sherrika, and you're watching And What TV. This is Breathe. Ricardo Bahia of Brazil currently holds the world record for surviving underwater for 20 minutes and 21 seconds. The average human can last up to 3 minutes. Well, for me, anything past 30 seconds might as well be an invitation to the afterlife. Here on land, I hold my breath every time I'm at a stoplight, every time I hear sirens, every time I see high beams in my rear view mirror, thinking, is this a broken taillight? Is this when I stream live? Will I be able to let go of my breath to tell the story? I hold it while holding CDs, Skittles, my ID. They ID'd me black, so now I'm holding it while holding up my hands. Ricardo held his breath to be a record holder. Black people still hold the world record for being human target practice. Some of us are holding our breath so they don't hear us breathing. It's better to play dead than end up dead. I wonder, do they still call it resisting in the afterlife? I hold it in awkward situations like being black and women in a room filled with white privilege, knowing they will call on me out of convenience. I hold it while filling in the status quo, while being the token black girl, because I can't be too black in these kinds of situations. We're holding it because we're too black to fit into America's lungs. Nose not structured enough to fit into our father's last name. Our families warn us about the war outside, but what if your house is a slow leaking gas chamber, 6-year-old sitting in fumes of your worthless? Do you know breathing become less easy when you're reminded that you're not worth it? We give our black boys oxygen tanks when they step off the porch, but force them to hold their breath, beat them down with mistake, blame it on tough love at dinner tables. I held my breath at a grocery store when this lady called her 2 black sons dumb, stupid, worthless like their father. I wonder, how will they hold their breath when they're given a compliment? When they're reminded of the privilege they will never have? Will breathing ever become easy if holding their breath was the only thing they've ever known?
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed Breathe. While we were watching the amazing poem, we kind of got into this whole digital thing that we're on, and it's virtual that COVID has caused us to do, and how much more time it increases. At least for me, I'm pregnant, it's COVID, I'm working from home, I literally have nothing else to do but be on social media. Mind you, I got kids, so you would think I have plenty, but they don't have nothing to do. So, it's very interesting, and it leads us to what we're seeing now with these protests and these demands that are being made have been made possible by technology and by the use of social media. If you think about back in the day, it took how long for Texas to get word that slaves were free? 2 years after.
You think they still got word? You think Texas, some parts of Texas got word?
That's another conversation from another place. So we talk about Juneteenth in context. 1865 is when they got word. But that's not when things happen. And I think technology makes us fortunate, but it also causes an overload because you can know too much. I think our kids know too much. They have too much accessible at their fingertips, and I think that's why we're seeing an increase in depression, an increase in child suicide, and school shootings, essentially, just because technology just opens up this portal of things. And if we don't fill it with like art, like Breathe, and art like stones, and art like Jamaica, they're gonna find everything else except an outlet. And yeah, if I just found it interesting. Like, you ain't got nothing else to do. I'm like, I really don't. I'm just trying to make it. Every now and again, I go on YouTube. If you guys want to hear some side note, if you guys want to hear some good poems, you can find a lot on YouTube. Poetry, PSI, who is now non-existent, but they still have poems on there. Type in spoken word poetry. You can find a lot of poems like this on a variety of topics from a very diverse group of people, and dive into it.
Southern Fried. Definitely type in
Southern Fried, yes. Dive into it at your own risk because it can become a rabbit hole. And you find yourself just watching poems all day long. So I think we'll just go ahead and talk about Breathe, how you felt. How old is that poem?
Probably around Ferguson, probably 2016. So it's about 4 years. About 4 years old.
4 years old. And here we are. And it is still relevant. It is aging too well, quite honestly. It is aging too well, quite honestly. But again, it shows using art as a medium to talk about something that's super heavy, and making it compact and understandable enough where everybody can hear it and be like, oh, that's what they're talking about? Kind of
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that poem.
And so, yeah. And so, like, you don't realize the anxiety you have when a police car pulls behind you. Well, I don't think I identified it as anxiety, right? So I don't think at a point in time I was putting labels to how I was feeling. And so I realized, like, literally every time like an officer would pull behind me, like I wasn't scared for a ticket, like, you know, tickets come and go, but like I was like legit like scared for my life. And it's just like, well, why am I feeling that way? And you know, once this exposure to social media with everything that was happening, and it was just like, yo, like what? Like, but also in that poem, it also sheds light on the Black community and how, you know, we treat our young ones too, right?
Yeah.
And so the flip at the end is like, we talk so much and, you know, we prepare our young Black and girls, Black and brown babies, you know, like, hey, this is what you do when you step outside the house, right? You know, you're respectful, you don't talk back, hands where you can see them. You know, we know that.
It's a checklist. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we know the rundown, but sometimes we don't feel them enough in the household, right? And so it's just like, you want outside the house, like you tell them, you know, like, hey, this is what you do, but inside the house, these babies are suffocating, right? You're not pouring into them as they need to be poured into, right? So you pointing out that way, right? But there's four fingers pointing back at you. Like, what are you doing in the house to ensure like your babies are healthy in the house to give them enough strength when they step outside of the house?
So important. So important to pour into our young people.
It is.
I'm always so envious of you guys who have been writing since high school and in the setting you have, like with B&V. That's still one of my goals on my list. Not quite done with Pompano yet. We got to take a team to B&V. So I'm going to need your help on that.
Remember, I ain't go, but I'll be willing. I'm there.
Right. But it's so important in that relationship between our children and the outside world and the inside. You know, my poem Bonker, we talk about that. It focuses on like, okay, I am literally ruining this kid because I'm only thinking outside and not inward. And it's a juggling and a balance for us a lot of the times to find that happy medium where we are preparing for the world we know they have to face, but also at the same time allowing them to be children and to pour into that innocence and that growth as much as possible. And sometimes it gets harder than others, and people really do the best they can to breathe. right? You do the best you can to just kind of exhale at the moment. So that's a very interesting thought. Do you guys have any thoughts? Did you have a moment, whether you're Black, white, or anything, where you needed to breathe? And what was that moment? And why did you feel like you were suffocating? And what did you do to correct it? And who was there? And how did you pour into yourself, or who poured into you? I think too, that's what gets lost in the message, where we're talking about something so specific that people forget that art is also very introspective. You're supposed to take and dissect it and eat what belongs to you and make it, you know what I mean?
And don't get mad at the things that don't belong to you, right?
Correct.
So
You can't
sometimes
get mad.
we focus on a part of the art that it's not relatable to us, so we get angry at it because it wasn't, that part necessarily wasn't meant for you. So now you're angry that you don't fully understand or comprehend why it's not fitting with what you got going on.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Rather than taking that energy and focusing on the pieces, like, hey, this piece, this part of it related to me. What can I pull and dissect from this section of it? Right? So
Yeah.
it's been a few. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, go.
No, I would say it's been a few pieces where I just had to be like, okay, I didn't get this part of it, but this half, like, it spoke to my soul, and being okay with that when it comes to someone's art.
Yeah, and then you allowing that to make you a better person, thus allowing what we want anyways, better people to people. You know, internalizing what works and what resonates, using it to become, and then using that to be better to each other. And I think as artists, you know, that's really at the end of the day why we create. To not force you to see our side, but to force you, I know speaking for myself, force you to see yourself in that work. Where do you fit into this piece? Where are you on the spectrum of breathe? You know what I mean? Because we all have a side, we all have a position. Where are you in this poem? And where can you be better in this poem? And taking those truths and using it to be better is all we could ever ask. I know me, that's all I could ever ask. Sometimes they're like, well, what's the point? Whatever you want it to be. Whatever you want it to be. I just told you a story. I just told you my story. The point is whatever you need it to be for you at that time, and using that to be better. So I think we'll end on that note. Any last words you want to say to the audience, or let us know about Sherrika?
Find me on social media. It's Legs Almighty on all platforms. I am working on a project, so if you follow me, you'll find out probably like in a year or two. But still, it's in the works. So just stay tuned. Yeah, I love what you're doing. Keep it up.
Thank you.
You're so dope. Love it.
Thank you so much. We'll see you sooner than a year. We're working on something as well, very precious to Pompano for November. Just a little teaser here. It's Miss Esther Rose Centennial, and we will be teaming up with some other poets to honor her legacy here in the city of Pompano Beach. So be on the lookout for Sherrika, myself, a few other poets, and a couple musicians doing some great things in the city of Pompano. Thank you for joining us for Blended Conversation. We'll see you next month with Miss Rachel Finley. Peace.